Okay, well, we're back here at Rev Talk with my dear friend and client, Steve Maggi, founder of the SMA immigration law firm in St. Petersburg, Florida. SMA law firm is they're a client of ours. I've known Steve, been working together for almost 10 years. He's an expert in immigration, focusing on business immigration, business visas and things like this. But we're gonna, we did a podcast on some cool stuff. We'll tell you about it later, so you can check it out. What I've been, I always go to Steve and I ask him these questions because again, you'll learn that if you go to smaimmigration.com, you'll learn how much he knows, how much of an expert he is. So we're watching all these TikToks on lawyers that
Mhm.
are explaining the certain cases. And I just want to go through what one guy is. We won't get into who these people are, but just like this one TikTok, the title is Trump cancels legal immigration. So this guy is saying that they stopped his client from boarding. So here he is.
Stop my client from boarding her flight with a legal immigration visa in her hand. Trump's executive order says that her immigration visa was not in the national interest. Trump is literally trying to cancel legal immigration cases that he doesn't like or agree with. We
So what do you think about that? Does that make sense?
It
This guy
makes
is a legitimate lawyer. Is an immigration lawyer, 100% legit. I fully vetted him. So what does that mean?
I haven't seen this phantom executive order, and my job is to sort of stay on top of these things. So I don't know what this person's talking about because the national interest, there's one category called EB2 national interest waiver. Once USCIS, which is part of Homeland Security, approves one of those petitions and the embassy gives somebody their visa, there's no other authority that exists, certainly not an airline or Customs and Border Protection, that can say, this is not in the national interest anymore.
Let's
Because if
continue to let's hear more of what he's trying to say here.
okay, yeah, I'm curious.
Taking action. Follow me for a big announcement.
Okay, so now he's still promoting, so that's not the case. So technically, he's trying to maybe scare people just so they can kind of log in and follow. I don't know. Do you think that's legit or
I really don't know. I think that a lot of attorneys, what they do is not the more unscrupulous ones, let's say, or they try to invoke fear in their clients to get, more views, and more people seeing them as advocates. But what they say has to be grounded in something that's real.
correct?
There are random cases where people are denied entry to the US, for example, because the officer thinks in their specific case, they're ineligible or they're what's called inadmissible because they have previous infractions or they did something in the past that they shouldn't have done, comes up in their record when they get sent to what's called secondary inspection. But that specific example just doesn't make any sense to me because that's something that's already been approved. That
Hmm.
premise of national interest to me is preposterous. And if you say this is happening to lots of immigrants, then you're telling them that visas are no longer valid. And that's not the case. Each case is separate, right? Somebody might have a valid visa, but is not allowed to enter the US because they're inadmissible for other reasons. That's one particular case. There's no such executive order that all of a sudden allows officials to not let people enter because of it's in the national interest.
That's strange. We have a client who was telling us a story last week, not last week, just actually a couple of days ago, that they were planning on building a call center in South America, and one of his business partners stated that at JFK, if you come from Colombia, or let's say, which is a country that's on Trump's deportation list, he's got a ton. He has a list. I think I had spoken to you about. He's got this list of I forget how many countries, which I think amount to like 1.4 million people who are on the deportation list. Nigeria, Venezuela. There's a number 23,000, 1,200, stuff like this.
Mhm.
That everyone didn't care. They didn't care who it was coming through customs, went through the right side to be checked. Because normally, if you're coming from overseas and you're a U.S. citizen, you go to the U.S. citizen. If you're a resident, then you go to the other side, right? They're
Mhm.
making every set. The line was outrageous, and so my client said they put a hold on it. They're like, we're not traveling out of the country now. So does that sound like something? Again, it's kind of it's what this lawyer is talking about. His client got denied or whatever because of this. So you think that now at airports around the country, international airports, obviously, they're going to enforce even more, that even if you're a U.S. citizen, because I'm a U.S. citizen per se, naturalized citizen, but I have to show proof of this. I mean, this is what do you think?
I think that just doesn't make any sense to me. So you're saying like in cases like yours and mine, people from Argentina who are citizens or Chile who are citizens could somehow be put into an extra under an extra level of scrutiny, even though we're citizens. Like,
This is
and
what he said. He said at JFK, that's what they were doing. The people coming from Colombia. It didn't matter if you're a US citizen, they put you right through the line. They were checking everybody, which he's like, I'm not.
I don't know if this is a reality or if this is just sort of part of the fear tactics. What happens, Pablo, now, as you know, because you're a master of marketing, is
Thank you.
messaging that comes out via these different feeds, social media platforms, etc. In 5 minutes, they can have an incredible impact, right? And if
Sure.
this is probably would be on the news in Colombia that this is happening, like watch out because and when people hear that, they tune in, they click, they get more viewers, it drives up their advertising rates and all that sort of thing. And this is the living for clicks world that we live in. Yesterday morning, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, accompanied ICE on a morning raid in the Bronx.
I saw that.
She did an X, she has her own X, Twitter following, where she wrote something like getting rid of the sleazeballs or something like that, like some catchphrase under her photo with her makeup on, of course, and her,
Hmm.
protective jacket on. And I thought, this is preposterous. Like this is a photo op. They're using this really sad moment in somebody's life getting detained either properly or improperly to promote and to invoke fear in people and to get more people paranoid. And I think this kind of reporting that some immigration attorneys are doing is for the same purpose. It's not, they have to understand these are isolated incidents. And if they're not giving you the legal reasoning for why this is happening or what to do about it to, comply with the law or what you should or shouldn't do, but they're just invoking fear in people, then I think that's an abuse of their position, right? As an
Yeah, you're
authority.
right. A lot of these guys are probably doing it just to bring traffic back. Like this other guy is talking about the um, the process that apparently Trump is changing. That before, if you're here illegally and you marry a U.S. citizen, then you could apply for a green card, and he's changing that completely, right? He's changing that completely, where now if you're here illegally, you cannot marry somebody, a U.S. citizen, and apply for a visa. You have, if you're somebody that's here that came here legitimately as in a visa, travel visa, what they're saying is you overstayed your visa,
Mhm.
then you can apply for that if you marry a U.S. citizen. So that's, again, that's gonna clip a lot of the people. The ending the birthright, right? There are people who are just getting pregnant in one side, and this is true. I've heard of stories from Europe of people when they were just coming here. There's nothing to do with Mexico. I know a lot of people from Europe that I do business with, that I know personally, that some of these young girls were getting pregnant and just flying here on right before Trump
Yeah,
took office because of that.
it's called birth tourism. In
Huh.
fact, he was when President Trump was running for office the first time, 8 years ago, he was talking about how he wanted to end birth tourism. It's a reality. Some people actually do that. They plan to
I
come
had
in the
no
last
idea.
trimester to get the citizenship rights for their kids. Where he was mistaken 8 years ago is he was under the impression that if you're born in the US, that the next day as a baby, you can then sponsor your parents who are illegal. You have to be 21 years old to do that. So that's those small inconsistencies or those gaps in his knowledge of the system become evident sometimes. They undermine all this, and people need to understand that there's various levels here of change, right? So birthright citizenship, you can't make that and make exceptions to that without changing the Constitution. That's constitutional law. That's the top and most difficult law to change. How many times in our lifetime have we heard about a constitutional change? None. Because you need two-thirds of both houses to approve a change in the Constitution or the amendments, right? To amend an amendment is almost impossible. We know the politics, the numbers of politics. Getting the two-thirds vote on anything is going to be close to impossible, right? When you create an exception to something like that, like let's say birthright citizenship can't be illegal because Americans have kids that are born in America. They should be citizens, right? So then you're making an exception for,
That's actually
oh,
a very
only
good
if
point.
it's somebody who was a child born to an illegal. But then you just gave me another division within that, which is there's two kinds of people that are illegal. They're the ones that overstayed,
Right.
and they're the ones that are who came in illegally without what's called entry without inspection or without author EWI. So then you're saying that the people who overstayed are okay, but the people who entered illegally are not. Why? Right? There's no bright line there. So it's not that would require a change in the Immigration and Nationality Act or a new act that amends, right? That means you need congressional law to be passed. When he signs an executive order or an executive memorandum, those interpretations of the law as it stands go into effect immediately. But if that's challenged in the court and the judge says, we're putting a stop to this now.
That's why these federal judges are blocking certain some of these executive orders. Is that correct?
Correct. They block them. They say until this is changed, they revert it back, then it's appealed, then it's denied, maybe it goes to the Supreme Court. They don't have an effect for very long because they're going to be challenged. Because when the president oversteps and starts to try to make law through executive order, then he's overstepping his boundaries, right? And the lines are so blurred right now, Pablo, because the president declared a national state of emergency in one of his executive orders. He essentially is treating illegal immigration as an invasion of the United States as if we were at war.
Right, right, right. That
That
was that
allows
that
him to
loophole I think they found.
exhaust, yeah, and that allows him to exhaust his powers and bring in the National Guard and troops to build up, the Army Corps of Engineers to build a wall if they get more access to funding. He's trying to stretch that executive power as far as it can go. But certain things like birthright citizenship and who can marry who and all that, that takes higher level change. And that involves Congress. And so that's not gonna be something that I think we're gonna see actually
I mean,
happen.
you and I have obviously have spoken about this. Oh my gosh, so many times after 2016,
Hmm.
and we both. I think anyone with a brain can agree that it needs to it needs to be fixed, right? One way or the other. Immigration, our borders need to be fixed, need to be strengthened, need to be. We all agree on that. That it needs to be there needs to be something. Now, I'll say this: that you know what, it may sound controversial to those listening at some point, but you know these laws, the Constitution was written before Facebook, before TikTok, right? I mean, let's go all the way back before TV and all these kinds of things. So it's a different world today than when these laws were written. So I think some of these laws and they should be reconsidered, right? But you're right. In order to reconsider these laws, aka rewrite them, it takes a massive, massive amount of constitutional resources, right?
Yeah.
Executive branch and this and that. I think in the new Department of Homeland Security, the girl, her name leaves me, but you're right.
Christine Noem.
She's very well kept. I was telling my wife this yesterday. We were driving to Brooklyn to a wake, and I was saying to her, I said, I think that a lot of these people that are being, you know, confirmed and that were lined up for this, they have so much anger and anxiety watching
Mhm.
this that a lot of them said, if I were in charge, I would do this, right? And I think that's what these people are exercising. The second they get turned on, they're going to say, this is how it should have been done. And, it's different than the norm, but if it works, I'm personally okay with it. If she wants to go on every raid and put herself at risk and make herself, TikTokable, if you will,
Yeah.
but it needs to be fixed, and there's got to be a starting point. But there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of anxiety, and I'm sure you
Yeah,
see it.
I think my first impression was when I saw this, it wasn't, oh wow, they're in the Bronx at 7 a.m. doing a raid. My first impression was she's made up. She looks like she's going to go on air on the networks right now, or she's going to, a gala. And to me, that undermines the seriousness of this. You want people to look like they're there to do the dirty work. They're not dressed for a ball, right? So
Right.
to me, it was just conflicting messages here. I think style should not matter now. This is now we need to get to the substance.
Right.
What's real? What are the real core problems? How can we fix them? How do we fix this, like you said, and fix it legally? The problem with executive orders to the extreme is that it shows no respect for our actual legal system and a total disdain for Congress. The Lake and Riley Act is one real tangible thing that we've seen that where Congress came together, right? And so that's where the change needs to come because bright lines are so important, Pablo. And here's a great example. If you are a US citizen and you marry someone who entered without inspection once, so they crossed the border illegally, never left the US again, and you can show that you would suffer what's called extreme hardship if they were no longer allowed to stay in the US, they can get a green card. They have to leave the country with an approval notice, go to their embassy in their corresponding
Even
country.
today, as Trump is in office, that would be the same case.
But so that exists today. But the bright line rule is if you've entered with inspection more than once. So if there's any record of you having entered twice, so you go in one time and you're released back on the Mexican side, right? For example, and then you enter again and you stay forever, you are barred for life from any immigration remedy, even if you have 5 US born kids and a US citizen spouse. That's the bright line rule. One entry without inspection is allowed if you can show extreme hardship, which is very hard to prove. So it's a very high standard. Now, what they're trying to do is say if you entered without inspection ever, you're not eligible for that. They have to change the law then. He can't just say, I'm changing it myself. So that's not going to work. And so that's where the bright lines have to come from a law that supersedes or, sort of replaces the existing ones that are in place now.
Wow. That's actually extremely interesting, and obviously I was never aware. That's why I'm so glad we're having these discussions, these topics. We're gonna educate. You're educating a lot of people who want to be educated. That's another thing. There's a lot of people that want to believe what they want to believe, and there are still people that think the Earth is flat. So it is. That's what it is. There's nothing you could do about it. But
It's all about getting, yeah, I don't know about, President Trump talks a lot about fake news. I don't know about fake news. I'm not an expert in that. You know more about that and the dark web and all those things. But I do know that there's bad information and there's good information. And
that's the whole thing.
that's what the issue is here. People need to get correctly educated. And one of the things my dad said before he passed, he told me one of the most important lessons he learned in life was that unlearning is even more important over the years than learning. And people have so much bad information, it's hard to unlearn that to clean the slate and to learn correctly. So if it's something that's constantly evolving and changing, like immigration law, you need to be able to get advised by people who know what it's like today and not what it was like last week or last year, right? Because that might not apply anymore. You need good information.
Absolutely correct, and that's hard to come by these days. You know me, I'm up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm absorbing information. As I said to you, you know that all day long is what we do. It's how we work with our clients, and we go back and forth. And I think that what's going to happen here also, there's going to be people who are going to be opportunists, right? And there's going to be and this, what I'm going to read to you now, this next
Mhm.
thread out there on social media, on TikTok, that's going around, written by this Spanish lawyer. I said, like I said, we're not going to call anybody out. That's not what we're here to do.
You mean
Just this
Hispanic, I'm guessing?
a Hispanic
It's a very
attorney.
northeast thing to say,
um,
Spanish, yeah.
yeah, Spanish, Hispanic. Thank you for
Sure.
correcting. So here he writes, because I think a lot of people are going to try to get over on innocent people, right? With the scare tactics. This what I'm about to read to you sounds incredible if it is true, right? So it says, good news. President Trump, actually, he published this yesterday. Good news. President Donald Trump just announced that he will grant immigrant workers permission to stay legally in the United States in 2025. Um,
Okay.
he could have said that, right? And this is, again, yeah, I think everyone is understanding what you said before, that there's going to be if this exodus of labor, this forced exodus, if you will, of labor, it's going to affect the economy. No matter how low the rates go, there's going to be nobody to build the homes that people are going to borrow money for, right? And everything else, and blah blah blah. So there's going to be people who are take advantage of this. Do you think that sounds like a possibility? Could that had been something that was misconstrued with the merit based law, or is the Trump cabinet really trying to find a way, what was called right to citizenship, right? Path.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
right. The
path to
path to
citizenship,
citizenship. Yeah.
right? How
Well,
would right?
I would love to. I think merit-based immigration has always been used as a term for who you bring into the country, who you allow in, professions like engineers, for example, things that in the tech world are highly necessary and were understaffed and undermanned in the US because Silicon Valley and New York and other hubs, Austin, Texas, other hubs in the US are still an incredible magnet for entrepreneurs and the investors, a lot of US investors in what are called venture capitalists, are putting billions of dollars behind new companies. And we need visas for people who can build out those companies and use their ideas and take those platforms and turn them into jobs, right?
Correct.
And so that's the merit-based immigration that we need. That's the kind of work that I do, most of the work we do. We need unlimited numbers and we need lower bars to get those people here or to keep them here if they're in our universities. What we've seen is hundreds of thousands of foreign graduates of the most preeminent universities, Cal, Berkeley, and Harvard, MIT, Stanford, that end up having to leave the US and reverse brain drain, as they call it, go back to their home countries, or others like Germany that have no caps on professional visas, and we lose all that intellectual capital. So merit-based is about keeping the intellectual capital here and attracting more and bringing them all here. No barriers. So if Elon Musk needs 1,000 engineers tomorrow and he's got those candidates lined up and he can't fill those positions with American workers, here's the path.
Correct.
Let's let this happen so the strongest companies in the world can be American.
Right.
That's merit-based, and I'm 1,000% on board. But
Makes
what you
total
said,
sense.
but what you said is, and it's from a previous conversation, and so I'll just reiterate, if the plan is to eliminate or remove all people who are here illegally, and that's approximately 14 million people, then we're losing 70% of those, or all the ones that aren't kids. Almost all of them are working, and they're working in unskilled labor positions that fill a need that we can't fill. Agriculture, construction, food service, those economies would essentially collapse and the prices would be driven up. I don't know what percentage, but it significantly would damage the consumers, get into people's pockets and limit what they can spend. So I think this is very encouraging if President Trump and the administration see this reality, eliminate the criminals and everything and get rid of the ones that don't serve a positive purpose or that are dangerous. Of course, nobody wants those people in any country. And then prioritize all the other ones, value them by saying, we will find a way. We will charge you lots of fines and make you pay
Right.
lots of taxes and all these things. So you are, just like we have in our criminal system. Sometimes you go to jail, sometimes you are incarcerated in prison for long term, depending on the gravity of your crime, or sometimes you pay a fine and do community service.
Right.
So this is a lower level crime. See it as that, an immigration infraction that has a deep penalty. I don't know, $10,000 a year, whatever it might be, where you generate billions and billions and billions of dollars for the economy. You don't say it's okay for that you committed this infraction. There's a big penalty for this, 10 years until you can apply for a green card. If you would get arrested for a speeding ticket,
And you're
you're
done. Right.
deportable, whatever it is, like
Right.
no exceptions. I have no problem with any of those things
And a
because
timeline, like you said before, a
yeah,
previous, so you put a cap on it, whoever did this prior to this, because then again, like you said before, you're gonna have it make it be okay to do that. And if you go to church and you give your money and you do something okay, you're gonna get that chance to path to citizenship. But
yeah,
you're right.
and people will line up because a lot of people, like I said, they came here as children, their parents brought them, or they came from war-torn countries or environments where their family members were getting killed and they were at risk of dying. So they've sought refuge in the US and since then have just been doing nothing but working, and a lot of them pay taxes, have not committed any infractions, kept their noses clean. Those are the kinds of people that I think you give them a big slap on the wrist, but you give them a chance to stay because then they can continue to, develop this country and keep it functioning. Otherwise, it's like Un Día Sin Mexicanos, that movie from
Right.
2004 that if people, non-Latinos probably don't watch that film, but to me, it's still 21 years later is on point.
It's relative. Yeah, it's dead on. You
It
know,
is.
and the one thing that we haven't touched on, and I'm glad that we're on this subject now, is you hear me say this all the time, the level of ignorance, and I'll say what I'm about to say to you, right? Hopefully it's like, wow, and I guarantee people don't think about this. They see the footage from Mexico and these families, these young, a lot of them are young families with their kids holding a baby, the guy, the young, whatever. They're crossing the river and they're underground, blah, blah, blah. They don't realize how that started, right? These people, a lot of them, and I'll say this with love and respect, a lot
Okay.
of them are, if a lot of them are uneducated. So they could be lied to by these coyotes. They could say, hey, you pay us this amount because they pay.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it, right? They don't do it for free. They pay these coyotes, so they call these are the people that smuggle them over, and
Mm-hmm.
these people probably tell them lies. They're lied to. They say we have a path. You're going to cross at night. It's not, but when we're going to get you to a place. They're going to get you a job, and they're going to get you paperwork, and you're going to be fine. You just got to give us $1,000. I'm making that up.
I think it's
So
like 10 or 15 is
something
requirement.
I've read that these people get lied to, and there are movies that have made about it, and they get smuggled in to a completely different reality. So when you see most of them walking out in the streets and their families, like blatant, like not giving, not even caring, you can see them. We were just in Brooklyn yesterday and in East New York driving by, and you think like ICE can go drive here and have their field day, right? But maybe that's why. Maybe they're not educated. Maybe they're lied to, and they're said, "Pay this money. We're going to put you on a bus. We're going to bring you to this house where there's going to be 15 families, and we're going to get you this job in construction, and we're going to and you just pay here and pay those people X amount all the time, and you're going to be a citizen." And they're walking around like this, like, okay. So this is the part, the disconnect. I use that word a lot. I use that a lot,
Mm-hmm.
disconnect in that part. So that's why it needs to be educated. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we need to drop pamphlets everywhere. I don't know, but it needs to.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what it is, Pablo? I was in Guatemala a few years ago visiting my uncle who lives there part of the time, part-time, and introduced me to this guy who had just been married the week before, 23, 24 years old. And he told my uncle that he was saving money to use a coyote to get into the US. A year later, my uncle said, I was in New York visiting, and my uncle said, "Oh, I'm meeting Juan or whatever his name is. And I said, "Who's Juan?" He said, "Oh, the guy who got married in Guatemala that you met a year ago." He already had his whole network set up in Queens, living in Queens with a job and all these things. And I didn't get to see him, but I asked my Uncle Paul, I said, what did he say about this? I mean, he just got married and he left his wife in Guatemala, and he said they had this plan all along that he was gonna make enough money to send back to her so she could also do it.
Wow.
And I said to him, why? I understand Guatemala is struggling and it's doing really badly, and there's no room for what they call upward mobility, right? But he said, I said, this could have gone sideways in so many different ways. And he said, they calculate the risk. They assume that they're not going to make it.
Hmm.
And then everything else is a plus. So they get there and maybe the job's not lined up or the people that they were supposed to live with aren't there or whatever it might be, but they figure out a way to make it because it's still in their mind, after they've made this investment, it's better than being back in their home country where they have
Yeah.
no possibilities of working.
Right. That is.
That's how extreme it is, Pablo. So that I don't, yes, people don't come
They
through,
don't.
network breaks or whatever it is, but people still are willing to take those chances.
True. And you don't know that if they do come here with that premise and they get forced into a gang and listen, I'm not
Human
like
trafficking.
right. That they can be approached by gangs and all of a sudden with a knife to the head said, you now belong to me and you're going to do this and forced into crime, blah, blah. There are movies made about this, right? Because it happens. And
Well,
that's the problem. In an overall, everyone thinks that every person who immigrates here, that, we're Hispanic, um, do exactly that. Just come here with the premise to just cross the border and just ruin everything, and just like cause, wreak havoc.
well, you see it. Having lived in New York a long time, I saw this all the time too in other cultures, like nail salons, for example, would get raided because you go to a nail salon in New York, the chances that any of the people working there are documented is slim to none. And
That's
they're brought
everywhere, even
in
here
from
in Connecticut.
but they're brought in from the same, they're part of a network that's brought in, that's calculated to bring them in, and they pay that fee that they have to be for smuggling, and they do it through ship containers, they do it through false documents, through on flights. They use other people's passports that are legitimate with visas to enter. There's a whole system here. Where they pay off over 7 years or 10 years. It's like the Irish rail workers and stuff back in the 1800s that were essentially indentured servants. It's that sort of thing, and that has continued to exist because those businesses cannot. You'd have to pay $55. I don't know what it is for a manicure, but instead of 15, you'd have to pay 55, right?
Right.
If you had American workers. And so this is going to change and totally, mind exploding stuff here. This is going to change a lot of industries if they can't figure out how to take all the people that are undocumented here, get them like that we would say in Spanish, en regla, like get their papers sorted so they can work legally. We don't know what the effect of that will be, but the government needs to see this as a gold mine opportunity for generating trillions of dollars of revenue over time that they can use to build a wall and they can use to enforce other aspects of immigration. Like there's no way you can deport 14 million people at the rate that they're doing right now. It would take 56 years. That was the calculation I did. And then people are still entering. So this just never ends, right? So you have to draw a bright line, stop illegal immigration first, and at the same time, only deport those that are not part of this legal work system. Like they're working, the employers are giving them a job,
Right.
and the employers just they just turn their sights other ways. They look the other way, as they say, right?
Right. You look at the I-9 and you say, okay, it's okay, I'm complying as a
Or you
business owner.
don't even do the e-verify at all.
Right.
I've talked off the record with people in the restaurant industry in New York. I worked with a lot of restaurants, and they said never tell anybody this, but I don't have enough employees if I can't get these people that are illegal. The restaurants would die, right?
And that's no
Construction
secret.
even more so. So I think President Trump, if he's being practical and not sort of just out for blood, which is what you see in the media, if what he said yesterday is true, then it gives us hope because these people need to stay here. Otherwise, our economy is going to literally implode.
So here's another one. Here's the last on the list of stuff to debunk, if you will, to get your thoughts on
Mhm.
what's being spread out there from other lawyers. Um, if you entered the United States, this was 2 days ago. If you entered the United States before 2001, you could qualify for permanent residency and live legally in the country, said Donald Trump, which kind of makes sense. But why prior to 2001? Why that
There,
gap?
yeah, there were measures in place. There's something called 245I that has very specific dates and the amount of time spent in the US and all that. The thing is, most people that applied for that have already, eligible for that have already applied. But
Gotcha.
it shows, President Trump sometimes confuses dates and measures and laws and things like that. So I don't know which one he's specifically referring to, but I think it's 245I. And it's still on the forms for the adjustment of status 245I. So there may be a few people that might qualify now, but that's for people who have been here for decades, right? So it's going to have almost no effect to talk to people about using that. They would have already probably applied for it if they were eligible, right? Because they've been here for a quarter century since then. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure
that
why he mentioned that. I would have to look at the particulars. What he needs is, like we just talked about, he needs to put into effect measures, and Congress needs to pass these that allow for the non-criminals and the ones who don't have any serious offenses to be able to get their papers in order. And the problem with the Laken-Riley Act, Pablo, that was passed is that it turns even minimal things like theft or burglary, which are considered misdemeanors in most states,
right.
makes them potentially deportable offenses. So I guess what they're trying to say is if you've never committed any crime or even been accused of any crime, then potentially you could be in that bucket where you can stay through these measures. And if that's the bright line that they have, and that's the bright line. Of course, in my opinion, not being a criminal attorney, you need to be convicted of those offenses. Because if you're
Right.
accused, we have so many wrongfully accused people on death row, even in America, especially African Americans, that to me, you have to be in prison for the offense you committed in order for you to be on that side and not in the bucket of those who deserve a second chance, right? And that's okay with me, but it has to be very, very specific who can apply, who can't.
I think, like I said, I don't have proof of this, but I think that from what I've read, that they're right now they're going. They had a list. They have a list of people that are deportable already who have serious crimes, gang members, and things like
Mhm.
this, and that's what they're going after. That was immediate, right? Day one, and ICE is going all over the country as we speak, and they're raiding. And you see the videos, and I'm watching them all the time on CBS News. Seeing everybody's reporting it, and you're watching all this stuff.
Yeah, I guess
So
this
yeah,
is like the inversion of the concept of being vetted, right? Or
yeah,
pre-qualified for
yeah,
something. Usually, if you're pre-qualified or vetted, that's a good thing. In this case, I think it's a good thing because if that is true, and they already know that these people are deportable, as long as they're put in the system and they go through their due process to be deported, I don't have any problem. I don't think anybody would have a problem with them eventually being removed from the United States. That's a good thing.
right. No, totally agreed. I had another one that I found. Actually, this actually relates to what we were just talking about. This is another attorney,
Hmm.
um, and he is saying that you need to be a lawful permanent resident for 5 years, 5 years before you file for your citizenship. Only two rules. Hold on one second. Only two exceptions to the rule. If you're in a bona fide marriage, you can
3
file after
years.
yep, 3 years, or you're enlisted. This is going pretty fast. You're enlisted in the U.S. military, you can file after 1 year. No special rules for asylum. People who got their green card through asylum have to wait 5 years.
That's,
So
yeah, and that's completely correct. All of that information is correct.
you need to be a lawful permanent resident for 5 years. Yeah. So this guy is, is pretty much
That
dead
has
on.
not changed, and that would require a change in the law. So that's one of the things, just like the marriage for a green card with someone who came in and overstayed doesn't require a waiver. That hasn't changed. And that Gerard Depardieu movie, Green Card, it's kind of silly and farcical, but that's the same avenue that still exists, and that's the one that you mentioned that President Trump wants to modify. Except you
Gotcha.
can't modify things that are in the law without amending the law itself.
Right. Even with an executive order.
Yeah, executive order says interpret the law this way now, but then there's going to be a temporary injunction at some point through a court that somebody, a state or an organization will challenge, which will probably be upheld and has to go through the whole appeals process like we talked about. So, and eventually the Supreme Court, I doubt they would say this is okay. They'll say, okay, Congress, do your thing.
Right.
And if they have a mandate that gives him a mandate to get something passed, then that's a way he's going to do it, right? First, let me try to put these executive orders in so my agenda's out there. Then let's go through the court system if we need to. Then let's put pressure on the Supreme Court. We saw in the last Trump administration, they fast forwarded or fast tracked a lot of cases to the top, of the Supreme Court when it came to President Trump, right?
I think we'll see the same.
Probably. The question is now, when will real laws be changed? When will the foundation of all this immigration law be changed? Once there's comprehensive immigration reform, if they vote to pass this into law, then a lot of these changes and tweaks that we're talking about will be possible. And then really then that's when everybody will have access to their remedies, or they won't, or they'll have to leave.
Right.
And I don't mind that either. What we want as attorneys, immigration attorneys, is clarity, transparency, and not this roller coaster and this hamster wheel kind of thing where we're going backwards and forwards.
Right.
That instability is not good for anyone, or for the people that live here, illegal or illegal.
Well, I can't thank you enough. Again, I talk about you all the time. I tell people how, your knowledge, your vast knowledge, your expertise, and about everything that you know, and that's why we refer to you as an expert, because you are an expert in the field. And I hope that the people that are watching this, that will watch this video podcast and listen to the podcast on Spotify, will also understand that and get, and then obviously vet it for yourself, what Steve is saying, what we're talking about here. Do your own research and vet it. And if you're going to vet it and you're going to follow something like the videos that I was talking about here, these guys are attorneys, doesn't mean that those guys are experts. But the last guy seemed to be in line with what you were finishing his sentences, right?
Yeah,
So
because he's just restating the reality, which is what
right.
people should do, right?
and that's what we're trying to do. Same thing like him, is to try to educate people, and the more that we can put out there. But again, I thank you for spending the time with us. We do have, several other podcasts that we're going to do together. We definitely have to talk about, because it's a hot topic. We keep doing these newsletters, we keep writing these articles, but I think this medium here it's gonna help a lot, and to put you out there so people could understand your level of expertise, because you're in the trenches, you've experienced it, you're an immigrant, and all that, so I
And
appreciate
Pablo,
you,
I just
Steve.
want to say the reason why I love doing this with you is people have to understand there's good apples and bad apples. And the way that President Trump speaks, sometimes it gives the connotation that all immigrants are bad,
True.
when it's a very small percentage of them, just like the general population. And to me, you're a shining example of a good apple, an immigrant who is a
Thank you, brother.
shining star that people should emulate.
Thank you.
And
Likewise. Thank you.
thanks,
Appreciate
Pablo.
that. All right, Steve, thank you so much. And for those of you, it's Steve Maggi, Steve, SMAimmigration.com. That's SMAimmigration.com. Google him. And for us, we're Rev Mode Marketing. That's RevMode.com. We're here in Connecticut. Steve is live right now from St. Petersburg, Florida. Weather was beautiful here, weather was terrible here, which is interesting because he's wearing a suit, I'm wearing a shirt, but I have my fireplace behind me. So till next time. Thank you, guys. Later,
Thank you.
Steve.
Bye.